Welcome, folks. Man, I'm so excited to be here today. I am charged up because I got to spend the last week in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania at the NCAA Division I wrestling tournament. And what a privilege that was to be there with a bunch of crazy wrestling fans, watching some unbelievable athletes. I put on Twitter, if you were watching NCAA basketball and not NCAA wrestling, you are a bad decision maker. My friends Jeff Lovingood and Bart Walker gave me a really hard time for that. But I want to discuss today this topic of development. Development is it's one of those buzzwords. You know, everybody talks about culture. I think it's a buzzword. Most of the time, I don't even think we know what culture we're aiming for. But development's one of those buzzwords. We heard it a lot this weekend at the NCAA wrestling tournament. There was a guy, Drew Foster. Man, this kid is a rock star from Northern Iowa University, where I believe is a program that's doing everything right. I mean, kudos to Coach Schwab, Coach Roper, Coach P, all those guys are administration. Even my boy Jim Millboy Miller helping out at Northern Iowa, speaking to those guys a lot. But we talk a lot about this word, Troy Walliser, thanks, Diaper League Baseball. We're going to address that here in 2 weeks, Troy. Thanks. Go back to studying sermons. But we're gonna discuss this topic of development. So the first thing I did is I looked at what is development. It's the process of developing. That doesn't help us very much. So I went back and looked at what is the word develop. What does develop means? It means to grow, cause to grow, become more mature, advanced, elaborate. It means there's progress on this journey. So, you know, when we use the word development, here's what I want to challenge us with, is that development, because when we get to the end of a year event, if someone does good, we say they developed. If they don't have a good weekend, then we say they haven't developed. And anytime we're looking at and we're measuring something, what we have to do is we have to look at an entire body of work. We can never take one day or a few days and measure whether or not something happened, because it's too finite of research in a sense. We got to have a bigger body of work. The other thing that we have to ask is, what are the things we're measuring that we want to be developed? I mean, is it just skill related? Is it just outcome related? Is it life related? What are those things we're measuring? Because we know this, that we can't manage what we don't measure. So we want to make sure that when we talk about this word development, that we're measuring the right things. With our children, for instance, we don't want to just measure their height and say, hey, man, they're really developing. They're getting taller. Well, no joke. They're going to get taller because they eat all the time and they're growing and they're maturing. Now, a lack of development may raise some red flags. We also want to develop their emotional maturity. We want to measure their development when it comes to skill and learning and all these different things. So we want to make sure that we're well-rounded in our development. So here's as I drove back from Pittsburgh on Sunday morning, my flight was delayed, so I just rented a car and drove home and listened to podcasts the whole way. But here's what I began to think about. Development isn't measured. You ready? We're going to get going. Development isn't measured by where you finish. Development isn't measured simply by where you finish, because you may not finish one weekend well. You may do poorly on one test at the end of the year, but that doesn't mean you developed. I mean, you could have grown in so many areas. I see that we see this in the academic world. Someone will not score as well on the ACT as we thought they should. And then we say, well, they just haven't developed academically. Yeah, they have. They have a 3.8 GPA. They haven't missed a day of school. They're super mature. They're prepared for life. They're probably going to be better than the kid who got a 30 on his ACT. I mean, we see these kids stressed out about the ACT. Listen, when I was 15 years old, I didn't even know what the ACT was. I thought it was a mouthwash act. You know, it's crazy. But development isn't measured simply by where you finish. Outcomes are measured by where we finish. All right. And we're going to get measured on that. If you're a coach out there today, you're going to get measured on it. You might get fired for it. Don't waver on your beliefs because of that. But development isn't simply measured by where you finished. Here's what development really is. Development is the distance between where you start and where you end up. So development is not just this dot of where you finished. You have to look at, where did I start and where did I finish? There are many people out there in the sport world that developed way more than others, yet missed out on an outcome. The other people were just super talented or super gifted, or they had opportunities that provided them situations. So development isn't measured simply by where you finish. Development is this space between where you start and where you end up. And in that space, we have to decide, what lanes are we measuring to see, is this person development? Did attendance improve? Did maturity improve? Did language improve? Did responsibility improve? Did their relationship ability, their ability to interact with people, did that improve? And then we measure things like skill, and we measure conditioning and all these different things. But here's what we have to be careful of, is that we can cause someone to think that they didn't develop, or their value is not as much as someone else, simply because their outcome at the very end wasn't what we expected or thought or hoped that it would be. We are treading on dangerous water when our identity is so wrapped up in those few things. So again, let's celebrate a kid's space. How far did he actually come? And here's what we know as coaches, and we say all the time, a definition of a coach is a covered carriage that takes someone of importance from where they are to where they want to or need to go. We know this. We have some guys come in way ahead. I can take a 7-year-old and I can look at him and probably watch him run around for 5 minutes and say, hey, this kid's way far ahead athletically and things at 7 than another kid. So I'll probably be able to help him hit a baseball a little bit quicker. But maybe we take that other kid and we cover all this space over 3 or 4 years, and he really developed more. He just probably wasn't, his potential, his ceiling wasn't quite as high. So development isn't measured by where you finish. It's the distance between where you start and where you end up. And I want to say this, there's a lot of coaches out there doing a ton of development that don't get as much credit for it because they have guys starting so far behind. All right. So to the coaches out there, whether it be a youth league coach, a middle school coach, a high school coach, find what you're measuring, measure it, celebrate it, and know that you are developing these young men and young women into something so much better than they would have been without you. So here's what I began to think about. What are the main ingredients of development? We talk about it. It's this catchword. What are the main ingredients of development? All right, you ready? I believe there's 5 ingredients. There's probably more. I was driving, talking into my phone, cut me some slack. 5 main ingredients of development. Here's the first main ingredient. It's hope. You say, what in the world does hope have to do with development? Here's what hope is. Dallas Willard defined hope this way. He said, hope is the joyous anticipation of good. The function of hope, keep my present circumstance open to a future possibility. Here's what I saw in Division I wrestling, that kids would come in really good, super talented, motivated, all these things, and they would struggle so much at the beginning that they would convince themselves that they could never arrive where they thought and intended to arrive when they first got there, because that struggle is hard and it's real and you're getting your head beat in and it's tough, and all of a sudden they lose hope. They think, I'm not good enough, I don't belong here, something's wrong, all these different things. Coaches, you have got to be a pharmacist of hope to those kids who don't just get it immediately, who are struggling. You never know where and how and what they can end up being, but you've got to breathe some hope into them in those moments they're struggling, because I'm telling you, despair is dangerous. It will cause a kid to quit, bow out, quit training, all these different things. It's not that they're not tough. It's not that they're not committed. They've just lost hope and they're struggling. So as leaders, whether it be a parent, coach, employer, whatever, we've got to breathe hope into people so that we can get them through that time of struggle and they can see that a better day is coming. And again, I mean, listen, Drew Foster won a national title, 15 and 18. As a freshman, kudos to Coach Schwab and staff for breathing hope into that guy. I've probably failed there at times as a coach. So number 1 ingredient, hope. Here's the second ingredient, intrinsic motivation. Intrinsic motivation. It is not motivation by award. It's not motivation by reward. It's intrinsic motivation. People that develop say, this is who I am. This is what I'm about. It centers around habits. Here's what intrinsic motivation is. Intrinsic motivation centers around habit, not feeling. Extrinsic motivation centers around feeling. Like, hey, man, if I get something, if everything's going my way, then it's good. If you want to see someone develop, then find people that are very intrinsically motivated. They don't need a reward. They may need some pats on the back. They may need some encouragement, but the habits of their daily life point to the fact that they know how to be great and they were willing to do the things it takes to be great, whether it's in the world of sport, academics, parenting, whatever. So it's intrinsic motivation, and intrinsic motivation is all about habits. We've got to create great habits. I will have coaches tell me at times, well, this kid's just not very tough. And they're saying he's not tough because he misses practice or he's messy or whatever. It's not that that kid's not tough. I mean, he may whip your tail in an alley, but it's that he doesn't have or she doesn't have great habits. And parents, that's why I believe if we can teach our kids good habits, we set them up for success later. So we want to teach them good habits. So first, quality ingredients, hope. Second one's intrinsic motivation. Here's the third one, an encouraging environment. Here's what we know about encouragement. Encouragement breeds courage. Encouragement leads to courage. All right. And here's what we know. Great coaches. Mike Denny said this. He was national championship coach at Nebraska Omaha, started a program at Maryville. All my wrestling cult friends out there know who Mike Denny is. But Mike Denny said this. Great coaches, they master the art of encouragement. So within the places we lead, we have to have environments that are encouraging, because encouragement leads to courage. All right. It always builds courage. It's not a lack of expectation. It's not a lack of discipline. It's just, hey, we want to be an environment where the leaders are encouragers, and we want to create an environment where the athletes are encouraging. I did an interview with Jordan Burroughs and Kyle Snyder on Friday morning at the NCAA tournament, two of the best athletes in the world right now, specifically in the sport of wrestling. And those guys, I listened to those guys affirm one another. Guys at the top of the podium. I mean, they are elite level. And here's what they did. They chose to affirm one another. As leaders, we got to create environments where it's encouraging, where everyone is trying to edify and build up. We live in a culture where the common language is sarcasm. We've got to X that, and we've got to be about encouraging. Again, we get pulled into these traps, and that's what we do. And we've got to fight against it, and we got to surround ourselves with people that will help us there, that we trust. So first ingredient, hope. Second ingredient, intrinsic motivation. Third ingredient is encouraging environment. Fourth ingredient, corporate and personal accountability. We have to hold people to a standard. Here's what we believe in, and here's the direction we're going. That can vary from program to program. All right, it can vary, but here's what has to happen. Every single person has to be in the boat rowing in the same direction toward those things, and then we have to hold each other accountable to be about those things. If you're about family in your program, be about family. And everyone's got to jump on board. If you're about being, good people, then be about that. If you're about being tough and hard-nosed, then be about that. But everyone has to be rowing in the same direction, and there has to be corporate and personal accountability. And here's the last thing. My guy Eric Phillips said there has to be an environment of belief. There has to be an environment of belief. Hey, I believe in what we're doing. I believe in where we're going. I believe this. If you have a young man in a team that has hope, that's intrinsically motivated, that's in an encouraging environment, that's surrounded by people that will hold him, and he will hold, or she will hold others accountable, and there's an environment of belief, you will have a program that experiences athletes who are developed. Does that mean you're always going to get what you want? No, I love how Paul writes to the church at Corinth, this athletic passage, and he says this, do you not know that in a race all the runners compete? Then he says this, it's pretty devastating. Only one guy gets the prize. All right, most people aren't going to get the gift that we're after. But then he says this, he doesn't say run to win. He says this, run in such a way as to win. Coaches, parents, athletes, our job is not to guarantee outcomes. Our job is to provide infrastructure so that we give athletes a chance to train in such a way, to live in such a way, to get better in such a way. And then what we pray and hope is that on the right day at the right time, we're at our best and we reap this reward. But what we don't want is if that reward's not reaped, for people to feel less than valued, to feel like their identity is not worthy now. So listen, man, let's work to have these ingredients in the things that we do. We're getting long here. what we want to make sure, especially in those younger kids, is that, and we say this all the time, I use this quote all the time, is that we're seeing kids today with gifts and skills that get them to a room their character won't allow them to stay. As we measure this term, and as we talk about this term development, let's make sure that we have a strategy and we have a plan for developing the character of our young people. Because the worst thing that can happen is that we develop one area and we forsake another area, and our kids and our young people find themselves in a room that their character won't allow them to stay. I believe this 100%. If we give them the character to stay in whatever room they can get to, then they will find a way to be successful, and they will find the room that matches what they're pursuing. So parents, man, we say it all the time. Don't try to be your child's sport agent. Build into them the things that are going to give them the chance. Again, I saw this weekend just so many great athletes, and there's a lot of ways to get there, but man, it was neat to see so many of these athletes and the character that they possess that help them not just get to the room, but stay in the room. Coaches, man, coach them hard, but love them harder. At the end of the day, when you're done and when they're done, they need to know that you value them for who they are and not just for what they bring to the table. And again, I saw so many great coaches this weekend at the NCAA tournament that truly demonstrate that and modeled that and believed that in their athletes' lives. So, man, thanks so much. What a privilege it is for me to work for FCA Wrestling, to be a part of A Better Way Athletics. Go follow us. If you're a wrestling fan, go follow at FCA Wrestling on Twitter, Instagram. Go to our website, fcawrestling.org. We got all sorts of resources. We got a ton of camps coming up all across the country for those of you out there that are wrestling people. For those of you out there that are sport people, man, go to A Better Way Athletics. Follow us on Instagram, Twitter. Go to our Facebook page and like it. Go to our website, or sign in, and you'll get added to our email list. Here's what we want to do. We simply want to be a part of the solution and not a part of the problem. And we believe we can do that by making a conscious effort to put sport in its proper perspective and do things and just do things in a better way. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you guys next week.